November 5th, 1605. Westminster Palace. A man crouches in darkness beneath the House of Lords, surrounded by 36 barrels of gunpowder. Enough explosive force to obliterate the entire building and everyone inside it. His name is Guido Fawkes, though history will remember him by his English name, Guy. His hand rests on a slow match, a length of cord soaked in saltpeter that burns at a precise, deadly pace. In 12 hours, when King James I enters the chamber above with his lords and bishops, Guy Fawkes will light that match and change England forever. Or so he believes. What Guy doesn't know, what he cannot possibly imagine as he waits in that cellar with the smell of damp stone and gunpowder filling his lungs, is that upstairs a letter has already been read. A warning sent by someone within the conspiracy. Someone whose nerve broke at the last moment. And at this very instant, the king's men are descending the stairs. The door bursts open, not with violence, but with the cold efficiency of men who know they've already won. Torchlight floods the cellar. Guy Fawkes stands, but he doesn't run. He's a soldier, a mercenary who fought for Spain in the 80 Years' War. He's seen death, dealt it, survived it. But he hasn't seen what England does to traitors, not yet. They bind his wrists with rope so tight the fibers cut into his skin. He gives them a false name at first. John Johnson, he says. A servant, nothing more. The guards smile. They've heard lies before. What happened next wasn't written in the history books you studied in school. It was recorded in the private correspondence of King James, in the interrogation transcripts held at the National Archives in Kew, in letters between Privy Council members that surfaced only in the 19th century. The truth was too disturbing for popular history, too calculated, too systematic. Because what the Crown did to Guy Fawkes wasn't about extracting information. It was about creating a spectacle of suffering so complete that no one would ever dare conspire against the throne again. If you ever wondered how a single man's torture became a national celebration that's lasted 400 years, you're about to find out. Here on this channel, we excavate the archives that mainstream history avoids. Tower of London records, Privy Council minutes, physicians' reports from the era. Every view, every subscription helps us bring these buried voices into the light. Now let's follow Guy Fawkes into the darkness. They don't take him to the tower immediately. First, he's dragged to the Palace of Westminster's own holding cells. A small stone room with no windows, no furniture, just 4 walls that seem to press closer with every breath. This is where the first interrogation takes place. Not torture. Not yet. Just questions. Who sent you? Who else is involved? Where are they hiding? Guy Fawkes says, nothing. He's been trained for this. Soldiers know that the first hours are crucial. If you can survive the initial questioning without breaking, you buy time for your comrades to escape. So he sits in silence, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the wall. The interrogators, members of the Privy Council, including Robert Cecil, the King's chief minister, don't seem surprised. They've dealt with stubborn men before. What makes this different, what Guy Fawkes doesn't understand yet, is that these men already know most of the answers. They have names. Robert Catesby, the conspiracy's leader. Thomas Percy, Thomas Wintour, John Wright. The letter that betrayed the plot gave them enough to start rounding up suspects across London. But King James wants more. He wants every name, every detail, every shred of the conspiracy exposed and destroyed. And he wants Guy Fawkes to provide it willingly or otherwise. On the second day, November 6th, Guy Fawkes is transferred to the Tower of London. The journey through the streets of London should have been his first warning. Crowds gather, not in sympathy, but in rage. Word of the plot has spread like fire through the city. Catholics tried to blow up Parliament. Catholics tried to murder the king. The mob screams, throws refuse, spits. Guy keeps his head down. He's still defiant, still silent, still convinced he can outlast them. The tower looms ahead, its ancient walls gray and impassive in the November cold. This is where England keeps its most dangerous prisoners, where Anne Boleyn spent her last days, where Thomas More wrote his final prayers, where the machinery of royal justice grinds bones into dust. Guy Fawkes is led not to a cell, but to a chamber beneath the White Tower. The room smells of old blood and fear. In the center, bolted to the floor, sits a device that has broken stronger men than him. The rack. Think about that for a moment. You've probably seen pictures of the rack in history books. A wooden frame with rollers at each end, ropes attached to wrists and ankles. It looks almost medieval, almost quaint. But what those pictures don't show you is the sound it makes. The slow grinding of the wooden gears as they turn. The wet pop of joints separating from their sockets. The screams that echo through stone corridors and haunt the guards who stand outside. Guy Fawkes is stripped to his underclothes. The November air in the chamber is so cold, his breath comes in clouds. They lay him on the rack, stretch his arms above his head, bind his wrists to one roller. His ankles are tied to the other. The rope bites into his skin, already raw from the earlier bindings. A man in a leather apron stands at the wheel mechanism. He doesn't look cruel. He looks like a craftsman, someone who takes pride in his work. This is Richard Topcliffe's successor, the official torturer of the tower. He's not here to cause pain for its own sake. He's here to calibrate suffering, to apply just enough pressure to break resistance without killing the subject. The king's orders, delivered through Robert Cecil, are explicit. Guy Fawkes must be tortured in the gentler ways first. If he doesn't talk, proceed to the harsher methods, but keep him alive. They need him functional enough to stand trial, to confess publicly, to serve as a living example. The wheel turns. 1/4 rotation. The ropes tighten. Guy's body stretches, his spine lengthening, his shoulders pulling against the sockets. It's not unbearable yet, just uncomfortable, tight, wrong. The interrogator, a Privy Council member named Sir William Wadd, speaks calmly. Tell us where Robert Catesby is hiding. Silence. Another quarter turn. Now it hurts. Not the sharp pain of a blade, but a deep, grinding ache that radiates from every joint. Guy's breath comes faster. His fingers curl into fists, but he doesn't speak. Where are the others? Where did you get the gunpowder? Who financed this plot? The wheel turns again. This time, Guy screams. It's involuntary, a sound torn from his throat before he can stop it. His shoulder joints are separating now, the ligaments stretching beyond their natural limits. His spine curves in a way it was never meant to. Every nerve in his body is firing, sending signals of distress to a brain that can't process them all at once. And still, he doesn't talk. Here's what breaks your heart. Guy Fawkes held out for 3 days. 3 days on that rack. 3 days of interrogations punctuated by turns of the wheel. 3 days of his body being systematically destroyed. The records from the tower, preserved in the National Archives, show that on November 7th, after the second session, Guy Fawkes still gave only his alias. On November 8th, unfur. The interrogators noted that the prisoner remained defiant despite increased pressure. A bureaucratic phrase that meant they'd torn his arms from their sockets and stretched his legs until the bones showed through the skin. But on November 9th, something changed. Whether it was the accumulation of pain, the realization that his comrades were already being hunted down, or simply the human breaking point, Guy Fawkes began to talk. Not everything. Not immediately, but names started to slip from his lips between screams. Robert Catesby, Thomas Percy, the others. The confession, when it finally came, was written in Guy's own hand. Except his hand barely functioned anymore. His fingers were broken, his wrists dislocated, his shoulders destroyed. The signature at the bottom of that confession, which you can still see in the National Archives today, is barely legible. A shaking, distorted scrawl that looks nothing like the firm signature he'd given under his false name 4 days earlier. That signature tells you everything the history books leave out. It shows you a man who has been broken so thoroughly that he can barely hold a quill. The trial, when it came in January 1606, was pure theater. Guy Fawkes and 7 other conspirators were brought before the court already condemned. They had confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was predetermined. But the trial wasn't about justice. It was about displaying the power of the crown, about showing England and the Catholic world beyond what happened to those who dared challenge royal authority. Guy Fawkes stood in Westminster Hall, the same building he'd tried to destroy, and listened to his sentence. The punishment for high treason was specific, detailed, designed for maximum suffering and public impact. First, the condemned would be drawn through the streets on a wooden hurdle, dragged behind horses through the mud and filth. Then they would be hanged, but not until dead. The rope would be cut while they were still conscious. Then came the drawing, the disembowelment, the removal of their entrails while they watched. Finally, the quartering, the cutting of the body into 4 pieces, and the display of those pieces on spikes across London as a warning. This was England's answer to treason. Not just death, but the systematic destruction of the body, the obliteration of the person, the message carved into flesh that some crimes deserved more than execution. They deserved erasure. January 31st, 1606. Old Palace Yard, Westminster. The place where Parliament now stands. A crowd has gathered, thousands strong. They've come to watch justice, or what passes for justice in Jacobean England. 4 conspirators are executed first. Robert Catesby, the conspiracy's leader, is already dead, killed resisting arrest. But the others, Thomas Wintour, Ambrose Rookwood, Robert Keyes, are dragged to the scaffold one by one. The crowd watches as they're hanged, cut down, gutted. The screams are audible even over the roar of the mob. Then comes Guy Fawkes. He can barely walk. 4 days on the rack have left him crippled, his legs useless, his body a map of torture. They have to help him up the scaffold steps. He looks nothing like the defiant soldier who stood in that cellar 2 months ago. He's gaunt, broken, a ghost of himself. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. As the executioner places the noose around his neck, as the crowd screams for his blood, Guy Fawkes does something that historians still debate. Whether from desperation, defiance, or simply the last spark of control over his own fate, he jumps from the scaffold before the executioner can push him. The fall breaks his neck instantly. He dies on impact, denying the crown its full spectacle, denying England the pleasure of watching him suffer through every stage of his execution. It's a small rebellion, barely worth noting in the grand scheme of history. But in that moment, with his last conscious act, Guy Fawkes reclaimed something they couldn't take from him on the rack. His death. They quartered his body anyway, cut it into pieces, displayed them on spikes, but Guy Fawkes was already gone. What remained was just meat, a warning written in flesh that would stay on those spikes for years, rotting under English skies, a reminder to anyone who passed by that this is what happens when you challenge the king. So why does this story matter? Why do we still remember Guy Fawkes 400 years later? Why do children in England burn effigies of him every November 5th, chanting, "Remember, remember the 5th of November"? It's not because of what he did. The Gunpowder Plot failed. It never had a chance. It matters because of what was done to him. Because King James and his Privy Council understood something that modern governments sometimes forget. Fear is more powerful than force. One man, properly broken, properly displayed, becomes a lesson that lasts centuries. Guy Fawkes wasn't just executed. He was transformed into a symbol, a cautionary tale, a ghost story told to scare children and adults alike. And it worked. For 400 years, his name has been synonymous with treason, his face immortalized in masks, his story told and retold until the man himself disappeared beneath the myth. But underneath the myth, beneath the bonfires and fireworks and celebrations, there's the truth. A soldier who believed in a cause, who stood in a cellar with enough explosives to change history, who endured 3 days of systematic torture without breaking completely, who died on his own terms when he had nothing left but that final choice. The Tower of London still stands. The rack is gone, removed, sanitized, turned into a museum piece for tourists to photograph. But the interrogation records remain. The confession with that shaking signature remains. The truth remains, buried in archives, waiting for anyone willing to look past the fireworks and face what really happened in those 4 days between capture and execution. You've just witnessed how one man's torture became 4 centuries of propaganda. If this story made you think differently about the celebrations you've seen, about the history you were taught, then you're exactly where you need to be. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought when you saw that signature, when you realized what those 3 days of questioning really meant. And if you want more stories where we dig beneath the myths and uncover the humans underneath, subscribe. Because history isn't just about what happened. It's about what they did to make sure you'd never forget. Guy Fawkes wanted to blow up Parliament. Instead, England blew up his body and built a holiday on the ruins. Remember the 5th of November. But remember the 9th too. The day a soldier broke. The day a man's signature betrayed what words never could. The day England showed the world that mercy was for the weak. And traitors got something far more calculated.